Before moving on to the next lesson, try this warm-up question. What are the equations of these lines? See if you can remember how to do it. Well, for the red line, the y-intercept is 5.5. Rise over run ends up being 1 over 2 in lowest terms, so the equation is y equals 1 over 2x plus 5.5. For the blue line, the y-intercept is negative 1.5. Rise over run ends up being 1 over 2 in lowest terms. So the equation for the blue line is y equals 1 over 2x minus 1.5. Now notice this. These lines are parallel. They have the same slope. In this lesson, we're going to talk in more detail about parallel and perpendicular lines. So we'll start with parallel lines. I showed these two lines to you in the warm-up, and we saw that they both had a slope of 1 over 2. So for parallel lines, slopes are equal. Now it's different for perpendicular lines. Here I have two lines that are perpendicular. Let's look at their slopes. The red line has a slope of up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. So the slope is 1 over 2. Now let's look at the slope for the blue line. Down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. So the slope of the blue line is negative 2. If you look at those two values, it looks like the fraction has just been flipped and the sign has been changed between positive and negative. This is what we call negative reciprocals. So for perpendicular lines, slopes are negative reciprocals. Some other examples, let's say one line has a slope of 3 over 4. Well, the perpendicular line would have a slope of negative 4 over 3. So again, it's negative reciprocal. Reciprocal means you flip the fraction, switch the numerator and denominator, and negative means you switch the sign from positive to negative or negative to positive. So let's try an example. Write the equation of a line that is parallel to y equals 2x minus 7 and goes through the point P with coordinates 2, negative 5. So remember, we want an equation. So as soon as you see equation for a line, you need to think y equals mx plus b. And we need to figure out what m is and what b is. So let's start with m. M is the slope. Well, our line is parallel to this line. Parallel means it has the same slope. So what's the slope of this line? It's 2. So the slope of our line is also 2 because they're parallel. They have the same slope. So we know m is 2. Now we have to figure out the y-intercept, b. Well, the only other piece of information we know is that our line goes through this point. So we can use this to figure out b. We know on the line at when x is 2, y is negative 5. So we can sub this point into our equation and we can solve for b. And once you have b, now you have both m and b, you can write the equation of our line. So for this line, the equation is y equals 2x minus 9. The slope was 2, the y-intercept was negative 9. I just plug them in for m and b. For the next example, write the equation of the line that is perpendicular to this line and goes through the origin. Okay, so I want the equation, that's y equals mx plus b. We'll start with the slope. Well, it's perpendicular to this line. So remember, perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. So what's the slope of this line? Negative 2 over 3. What's the negative reciprocal of that? Well, the sign changes, so it's positive, and top and bottom switch, so it's 3 over 2. So our slope is 3 over 2. So I know my equation is y equals 3 over 2x plus b. So I need to figure out b. I need to sub in values for x and y in order to solve for b, just like in the previous example. So what are some coordinates that I can sub in? Well, it goes through the origin. The origin has coordinates 0, 0. So when x is 0, y is 0. So I can replace x and y both with 0, and I can solve for b. And once I have b and m, I can make my equation. So this line has an equation y equals 3 over 2x. Notice I didn't put plus 0 at the end. I don't need to do that. If you happen to do that on a test, I wouldn't mark it wrong, but just to clean things up, we don't write plus 0. For this last example, it's a little bit different. I'm not told that it's parallel or perpendicular to any lines, and I'm not told what the slope is. All I'm told is that this line goes through the points A with coordinates 2, 5, and B with coordinates 7, 0. So I'm just given 2 points on the line. I have to figure out everything else. But the principle is still the same. I want an equation of the line, so I'm thinking y equals mx plus b. I need to know m, the slope, and I need to know b, the y-intercept. So let's start with m, the slope. Well, I know slope is rise over run, or the change in y over the change in x, delta y over delta x. Because I have 2 points, I can figure out the change in y. It's the difference between my y coordinates. So I can do 5 minus 0 to get the change in y. Also, I can do 2 minus 7 to get the change in x. It's the difference between my x coordinates. So once I have that in place, I can calculate the slope. So in our case, 5 minus 0 is 5, 2 minus 7 is negative 5, 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. So our slope is negative 1. So now I can update my equation, y equals negative 1x plus b, or just y equals negative x plus b. Now I still don't know what b is, so I'm going to do the same thing as I did in the last 2 examples. I'm going to substitute a point into my equation. So I need values of x and y. Well, you can choose either x is 2 and y is 5. Follow that through, you'll solve for b. Or you can choose x is 7 and y is 0. And you can follow that through and solve for b. It doesn't matter which point you substitute into your equation. All that matters is that you pick one of these points that is actually on your line. So I'm going to pick b. So x is 7, y is 0. This is my equation. Now I can solve, and I end up with my answer for b. So now that I have m and b, I can write the equation of my line. It's y equals negative x plus 7. So anytime you are asked to figure out an equation of a line, you need to know the slope and the y-intercept. So once you have figured out your slope, plug in values for x and y using a point that is on the line, and you can solve for b. And then once you have m and b, you now have your equation. And it's the same process regardless of what the question is. As long as you're trying to find an equation, you can solve it this way.